Do you want to know the three underlying components of cybersecurity? The three cornerstones that everything else in cybersecurity is built on? Hi, I'm William, and welcome back to the SMB Secure YouTube channel by CyberX, where we help small and mid-sized businesses identify risk, improve their security, and reduce the risk of breaches. Today, we're going to be talking about CIA. These are the three cornerstones of cybersecurity. And if you're thinking about the government organization that spies on people and does covert operations, that's not what I mean. CIA stands for Confidentiality, Integrity, and Availability. Everything we do in cybersecurity is really about CIA, Confidentiality, Integrity, and Availability. And understanding those and being able to implement them properly is essential for building a cybersecurity program for your small or mid-sized organization. So what is confidentiality? Confidentiality is the security control most people think about when they think about cybersecurity, because confidentiality deals with keeping private information private. We only want to allow people who are supposed to see data to see it. The people who are supposed to have access to it to have access to it. Essentially, confidentiality is about preventing unauthorized access, and that's what everyone thinks about. That's what we're trying to do. So a great way to think about confidentiality is to think about the military and how they classify documents. Even if you have not been in the military, you've probably heard about data classification levels in the military. They have different classification levels. Secret, top secret, and then maybe they have, on top of top secret, they might begin siloing some of those, and they have top secret this and top secret that. I've never been in the military, so I don't know any examples, but you understand the point, right? Data is built in classification levels. And this is much how we handle confidentiality in our networks or in cybersecurity. Our data is classified into levels, and users have access to that data based on classification levels. And there are different ways we can approach this. What we just talked about, those classification levels, is what we call mandatory access. And that is essentially classification levels that are built in strata or layers, and depending on the layer an individual or a group of people is what they have access to. We might change that, and we might do a role-based access model. We see this show up more in IT infrastructure. In the hybrid model that we use, we see role-based. And in a role-based access control system, we have classifications based on roles. So an HR employee might have access to this data, but an HR manager might have access to a different level of data, which is different than what an engineer might have access to, which is different than what an accountant might have access to. And every level of access control is based on a job. So when a person is hired for a position or is promoted to a position, based on the position that they are taking, they get access to that data. That's a good starting point, but I recommend you be a little bit more stringent. We want to create our access on a need-to-know basis. We don't have time to get into it in this video, but check out our Zero Trust video where we talk about extreme access control. Each individual should have access to the very least amount of data they need to do their jobs. So some of the ways we might go about enforcing or controlling access for confidentiality is, of course, what we talked about with access control mechanisms. Or we might use encryption so that private data stays private and only those individuals who are authorized, who have the decryption keys, can view the data. We may have multi-factor authentication on top of our access control so that we can be sure the individuals we want to are the ones viewing data. The next pillar of cybersecurity, or the next cornerstone, is integrity. Integrity simply means that we want to ensure that data is trustworthy and that it has not been altered by an unauthorized party. Now, integrity is a super critical component in cybersecurity that I don't think gets enough attention. I think organizations need to pay a lot more attention to integrity, as it is kind of the glue that holds the other two cornerstones together. So let's give an example how integrity might be important. Let's think about a medical office, a doctor's office, who has electronic medical records, or EMR. And if they have a patient who comes in, the patient is weighed and the weight is entered into their records. That weight is used for dosages of medication, and that information needs to stay valid. It needs to be unaltered, because if someone interferes with that data and alters it, they change the weight of this individual, then the dosage that they are recommended would change as well. And as you can figure, that would have adverse effects on the individual. That could be deadly to them if their weight is entered differently than what it actually is if it's been altered and they are given the wrong dosage of medication. So in cybersecurity, we want to verify integrity of their data that we are using. When we send an email, we want to be sure that the message is received by the recipient the same way that it left. It has not been altered in transit by a man-in-the-middle attack or a malicious individual. Another big area where integrity is important is file and system integrity. Let's take a SIM for an example. A SIM is a security event incident management solution that analyzes logs coming from your system. If I could compromise that system, I could change the data it's giving you, I could change the logs, and I could fool you into thinking everything's okay in your organization. The same with a computer system. We have to be able to validate the integrity of our systems. They have not been changed by an attacker. And this is especially important for administrative devices, servers, and those critical devices in our environment. We have to be sure they have not been changed, and we have solutions in place that we can monitor that they are changed and that they are not changed, and that their integrity is valid. The final big cornerstone in cybersecurity is availability. Availability is another one that we think of pretty regularly now that ransomware has become so common, but let's talk about it. It's very likely that your organization has data that you cannot function without, right? If you are an e-commerce site, you can't function without your website. If you are a doctor's office, you can't function without your patient records. If you are an attorney, you can't function without your client files. Every business has data that they have to have, no matter how big or small you are. And availability in cybersecurity is about making sure those systems are always there when we need them. And of course, the most common way to do this is with backups or replication, having multiple systems in place so that we can always have access to our data into our systems so that our company can function. So a big part of availability and ensuring that we can keep availability even in adverse conditions or circumstances is incident response and business continuity planning. You have to have a plan in place for if things go wrong, what are you going to do? How will you handle it? Many organizations have an incident response plan, but they don't test it. I heard a story once about a security auditor who was auditing incident response plans, and he put yellow tape around the building. When everyone came to work, no one could get in. He said, "What's your incident response plan?" They said, "It's in the building." The point was made. You have to know what your incident response plan is. Practice it so that you're ready. Should an event happen, how can you fail over, or what can you do to ensure that your business or your organization can continue to function and begin restoring those systems? So while information security is made out to be complex, which it is, there are really just those three underlying controls, those three underlying protocols, those pillars of cybersecurity that we implement: CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you want more cybersecurity guides for small businesses, be sure to check out our blog at cyberx.tech/blog. We have lots of articles and guides to help you through every phase of your small business cybersecurity journey.